Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 3 of the CyberEdge. I'm Drew Fearson, and joined today by the one, the only, the man, the myth, the legend, David Hunt. David, thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me here.
Absolutely. So, David, we've chatted a couple times in the past about things and had some very interesting conversations. So I thought, you know what? This is going to resonate well. Let's get him on the pod. Let's chop it up, learn a little bit more about you, kind of where you've been, what you've been doing, some more stories, and then get into the crux of it, which is, you know, kind of what the current state of artificial intelligence, as well as the current state of AI and security, and what the future state's going to bring. Because what we found is that the audience, it's one of those things that's out there that's compelling, and everyone's like, there's some trepidation around it, right? What's it going to
Totally.
be? How's it going to impact me? All those types of things. So that's kind of what we want to unpack. But first off, everyone starts with an introduction. So David Hunt came up through kind of the red team offensive security side of the house for a number of years, has designed 5 enterprise security products to date. 4 of those have reached 50 mil ARR or valuation. Founded a cybersecurity company called Prelude. Prior to that, was at MITRE as a senior security engineer, where he designed and wrote Caldera, which I know a lot of you out there know what that is. And it actually spread to 40 different government agencies. So something that's very kind of paramount in our industry and well known and used. So did that cover everything?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good covering. So yeah, I've been in the industry for almost 20 years. Lots of different experiences from those startups and on the government side, which is where I kind of came up
Yep.
into the public companies and eventually founding my own company. Lots of really cool experiences and lots of things we can dig into.
Nice. Well, let's start off with you. So tell me about yourself. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? How'd you get into this fun game that we call security? All that type of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, I think for my background, it's very similar to a lot of other people that are, call it my age group and older. Before cybersecurity degrees really existed at any school, you kind of had to work your way into the industry in a backwards kind of way.
Yep.
And so for me, I grew up in a really rural town in northern Maine. And so really the middle of nowhere. I actually didn't get my first computer until I went to college when I was almost 19 years old. And, growing up in rural Maine, there was obviously internet connectivity issues in the early 2000s. And there's still internet connectivity issues in rural Maine. But I grew up in a family that really was not computer literate.
Hmm.
And my parents had seen a few too many Dateline episodes back in the day of what can happen when you're on the internet. And there's a disconnect of what the internet is versus what a computer is. And so I never really got an opportunity to use a computer until I went to college. And I went to school at a university called Liberty University in Virginia,
Yep.
Central Virginia. And I went there, and at that time period, again, this was around the 2003, 2004 time period, it wasn't assumed that every student knew how to use a computer. And so they had you take an entrance exam. How well do you know how to use your computers? And I failed miserably. You needed to get like at least 70%. And I got, I don't remember, 40, 50%. And I was really, really bad. I'd never really used a computer outside of a few classrooms and like keyboard class in high school. And as a result, they forced me to take a computer class, one computer class over my 4-year university time. And I had a major in journalism, and I chose for my computer class, I took Microsoft Excel,
Mm.
and I got, I think, like a 72% in that. So I did a passing grade, and that is the sum of my computer slash cybersecurity training to date.
Nice. So how'd that transition happen? So you graduated from Liberty,
Yeah.
right? And then where'd you go?
Yeah, so it was really interesting. So in at Liberty, I worked at an Applebee's for a couple of weeks, and then I measured my paycheck to my college tuition bills, which I paid myself, and it didn't really equate to me. And so what I did was I actually founded this is what you do when you're like an overconfident college student at 19 years old. I founded my first startup. And I didn't really realize it was a startup. I was looking at it as like a small business. And I founded a company called 100 Right. And 100 Right focused on search engine optimization for small businesses. And so I worked with a lot of people in Central Virginia, a lot of these small, like local businesses who are just getting online for the first time to help them get higher search engine rankings. And so I went to, again, showing the age a little bit here, Circuit City, bought my first computer. I don't believe they're still in business. And I taught myself kind of the basics of search engine optimization, which was a lot easier back then. And ran that business all through college. And that was kind of my primary, obviously, source of income. I hired some people to work at the company as I grew it. And toward the end of my college years, about halfway through, maybe junior year, I did what a lot of small business entrepreneurs do when you're 20 years old or 21 years old. You say, hey, how do I grow my business even more? I said, if I can just figure out how to bring the search engine optimization of my competitors down, that helps my customers. What do you do in that case? You have to hack into the servers for the competitors and do the opposite of search engine optimization and saturation. You have to mess around with it. And little did I know that that really was a frowned upon type of activity. And it wasn't something that really crossed my mind too much. But I did that to, let's say, the wrong people. And then fast forward about 2 years, and I'm working at Rockwell Collins and doing offensive cyber operations, which was an authorized use of offensive capabilities. And that kickstarted about 10 years of my life doing OCO-like activities for the U.S. government.
Gotcha. So did work for the government for a number of years, did a lot of cool stuff. Uh, any cool stories there that you can talk about or allowed to elaborate on?
Yeah, I think it was really interesting. So I essentially was able to live a dual life or a dual career at the same time, which was really neat. So OCO work in a lot of cases, you're working for public companies or close to public companies that have government contracts,
Yep.
and you're doing operations in parallel. And so that enabled me to do some level of public work while still working for the U.S. government. And so from a really cool perspective is most of those stories I can't dig into
Yep.
too many details, but some of the fun ones during that period, I'd say that I got to work on were things like John Deere, one of the companies I worked with. And at John Deere, what I did was I worked on the geo bounds of tractors. I learned a ton about agriculture in this. I actually lived in Iowa for about 5 years during this time.
Really? Wow.
Oh yeah. And we worked on GeoBounds, which was, call it the 2009 to 2012 time period, where the team that I worked within was figuring out how do we create boundaries for autonomous tractors that can fit within it. So when the farmers are actually kickstarting their tractors, they're going to make sure that they, on a 80 acre tract of land or 100 acre tract of land, that these tractors are going to stay within the bounds. How do you both create the technology for that and secure the technology for that and then deploy it worldwide? And so a project like that, had all sorts of really cool angles, but playing like a really critical role in that at an early age was a lot of fun. So the work I did in OCO really gave me an opportunity that I think I didn't really fully understand until years later, which was like high profile projects that enable me to jump in without the level of experience that you
Yep.
otherwise would just because of the government connection.
That's really cool. So how did you get out of kind of the government work?
Yeah, so that's a great pivot point into MITRE. And so
Hmm.
I got married in 2017. A lot of government work on the OCO side requires a lot of travel, a lot of, busyness there. I got married in 2017, was looking to dial a lot of that back, and was able to land a position at MITRE as kind of my last stop on the government tour. And MITRE Corporation is primarily based in, Boston and Washington, D.C. area. And it was a fascinating place for me to go because it was what's called an FFRDC, Federally Funded Research and Development Center. I'd never worked within one of those before, and the government, made that kind of my final stop. The cool thing about an FFRDC is they're legally not allowed to build or bring products to market.
Hmm.
And so that was always really fascinating. They're Congress, taxpayer funded, multi-billion dollar corporations. It's like a bunch of these FFRDCs around the country. And that was my last stop. And I was able to go there primarily to take over a research project that was codenamed Caldera at the time. And it was in white paper form. The government had been kicking around, how do we create an autonomous hacker? And they really wanted to bring that hacker into the world. But they needed somebody to build it. And that was my role in it.
That's really cool. So how did you go about doing that?
Yeah, so I went there. There was only a couple of people, maybe two, three folks on the Caldera team,
Mhm.
largely from the research perspective. Some really smart PhD scientists like Andy Applebaum, I believe is at Apple now, like really smart core team. And I went there as kind of the executor of like, hey, this guy knows how to like actually bring the things and build prototypes and bring them into the government. And so what I did was I looked at the white paper, spent about 3 months analyzing the research and looking at things. And then I essentially sat down and using Python wrote the initial version of Caldera that people are used to today. And it got really popular within the government space. I was able to hire a few dozen people into MITRE, which was really a cool experience. And I even started my own internship program within MITRE, which is really fun on the team because we had so many people wanting to get on the team. And what happened was we had such a hunger and a need in the government to expand the project
Mhm.
that they allowed me to open source it in 2019, the framework. So there's a closed source
Yep.
portion on the AI side, and then there was an open source framework that allowed me to essentially recruit more people into MITRE. And my goal out of that was to attract more AI researchers into MITRE. But what ended up happening, that did happen, but what happened as a result was pretty much every enterprise out there started using Caldera for internal security. I never expected that. I was never anticipating it. And all of a sudden I was getting calls from, Facebook and Google and Amazon, and people were asking me, how do I do this or that or deploy Caldera at scale? And my response was always, don't. It's a research project. But it's amazing how far that project has come in recent years and how now it is such a staple in offensive security departments.
So it went from being an essentially an autonomous hacker tool thing to being something that was used by large enterprises to defend. So you've really
Yeah.
been at the forefront of this whole artificial intelligence use case since before a lot of people, especially lay people, were talking about it,
Yeah,
right?
it's really funny. Like, it's something I don't bring up too much because how much of a buzzword AI is
Yep.
today. But during that time period, I ran two research labs, AI research labs in what you can call maybe pre-transformer architecture models that are around something called automated planning technologies.
Hmm.
And those are pre-LLM style artificial intelligence. But yeah, I ran those two research labs, grew them, and really got to see kind of how that started to transform itself, to you overload that term, into what is now known as LLM, artificial intelligence.
Nice. Very cool. So you were at MITRE for a while and then left there. Where'd you go from there?
Yeah, so I founded my own company
Okay.
coming out of MITRE, and it was really kind of special for me actually that whole process, because MITRE was actually one of the very first investors in the company.
Oh,
And that is like super rare. I don't know if how often they do it or if they've ever done it, but they actually were MITRE proper was one of the first investors in Prelude, and the goal was to commercialize a lot of the research I did when I was at MITRE, and so that was a really special thing to have MITRE backing it. And yeah, started the company in 2020, and it got successful and hit a good path right away, which is we got backed by Sequoia, CrowdStrike became an investor, Insight Partners, some like really high profile names which are really special to see get involved in the first year of the business. And that was really a big focal point of my life for about 3 or 4 years as I was commercializing a lot of that research.
how did it impact you going from working at a MITRE, right, where it's quasi government, right, federally funded, to starting your own thing, being like, all right, now I'm still the guy that's doing it, to getting these big names in, like your Sequoias and the like, that now all of a sudden you have a board, you have to set up all that stuff. It's a lot more of that kind of startup business focus. How did that impact your day to day and what you were doing?
Yeah, it's a great question because I think for a lot of people that, especially in cyber that have ambitions of, hey, I want to start my own company one day.
Hmm.
Like this is a great answer for the group out there. The way I set it up was I think probably a smart way at the end of the day, which is I got to focus on technology and was a CTO of the company and try to keep myself segmented into that side. And then I co-founded the company with somebody that was strictly on the business side. And so they did operations management of the board while I did all the technology and the product and the building. And that pairing of operations on one side of the house and tech on the other side of the house, especially in the early days of the company, was pretty productive and worked well.
So you still got to do the stuff that you like to do and let your
Exactly.
co-founder deal with all the trials and tribulations of the board and the growth there.
Exactly, because I had the cyber experience, the tech experience,
Mhm.
and he had the startup and the operation side. And it's a way that is I think not a bad way to kickstart a startup.
Nice, very cool. So, Prelude, what happened after that?
Yeah. So yeah, ran Prelude for 3-4 years. Really had a lot of fun. I actually wrote a book about a lot of my experiences there. It's
Nice.
called Irreducibly Complex Systems. And that's if you're interested in reading that, that goes over a lot of those kind of initial experiences, a lot of time jumping into the tech side of what I did at Prelude. And eventually, startup life and security life is let's say complicated. There's a lot of things you run into that are take a lot more of your time than you anticipate, especially as the company grows.
Yep.
And what I kind of learned through that process is I really wanted to get back to a lot of my roots, a lot of the things that I thought were producing more impact. And so I walked away from Prelude about a year ago, so toward the end of
Mhm.
2023, and was hoping to take a few months and reset and kind of get a better feel for where security was headed with all the new AI stuff that was coming out. And during that time, I met a guy named Richard Ford, who
Mhm.
is the CTO of Praetorian, and he invited me to join Praetorian and take over as the VP of Applied Research, which seemed like a phenomenal idea because I can kind of reset. It was a little faster than I wanted to, but
Yep.
I could reset, run my own kind of 0-day vulnerability team, and try to figure out what my next step is. So I ended up accepting that role and spent most of 2024 actually doing 0-day research and helping Praetorian kind of accelerate their own product and vision.
Nice. So, what are you doing today? What's keeping you
Yeah.
busy?
Yeah, so I recently walked away from Praetorian with the goal of actually doing a reset. And so for the last few months, what I did, my big thing at Praetorian that I did that I think I'm most proud of is I helped that team take what was a struggling ASM product called Chariot, Tax Surface Management, and bring that into market as like a really profitable, really scalable product. And so after version 1.0 was released is when I walked away. So I was really proud of kind of that experience and the overall team there. But yeah, over the last couple months since releasing version 1, I've been able to essentially officially do my reset and ponder the environment and where I see things going. I think the AI landscape and how it's going to impact cybersecurity is obviously of most interest. And I think that there's a lot of effort going in the wrong direction, and there is a little bit of effort going in the right direction. But I've been kind of analyzing that recently and doing some interesting work on the side. I launched a new service called the Pink Duck Company, where what we're providing is cybersecurity insurance for small businesses. And so that's been really enlightening, a lot of rewarding experiences there and case studies that we've done. But what we've been developing and serving our customers with is how can we ensure that small businesses who usually see cybersecurity as out of reach,
Mhm.
how can we bring an affordable solution to them that they never have to think about security? It's like a special kind of MSP relationship, and I think that we've cracked a pretty cool a pretty cool code there. But time will tell over the next few months.
Are you doing just insurance, or are you securing their environments as well?
Yeah, so we do one of two based on if they have an IT department or not.
Uh-huh.
So if they have an IT department, then what we do is we provide insurance, and the insurance that we provide is in the form of incident response. So talking to a lot of small businesses, what they could care less about the damage payouts because most of the time you're out of business by the time you get a
Yep.
damage payout. They're most interested in, I just got hacked, who do I call? That's the answer they want. So that's the insurance we're providing is them a phone number they can call 2 seconds after getting ransomed or getting phished and have somebody that can jump in and solve the problem. If they don't have an IT department, what we do is we offer a fully managed IT service
Mhm.
that comes in and handles all of the securing of their environment as well as full IT support 24/7. And what we've noticed on that side of the fence is we usually reduce for that size company their technology costs by about 90% month over month, which is astronomical. Most people don't believe us until they start using the service, but we found that most small businesses are just overpaying for their technology because they don't have an IT department that has set things up in an efficient way.
Nice. That's awesome. So let's take a step back, right? Because you took your reset and you've been focusing on current state of AI specific to security. And you said something interesting that you feel a lot of people are going the wrong way and some people are going the right way. Unpack that for me. What, in your view, is the wrong way that people are focusing on? And then conversely, what should everyone be focusing on?
Yeah, it's a great question. So you can call this the trauma of AI. What's happened in the last 18 months that has really shooken up a lot of people. So the things that I'm seeing are going the wrong way are typically the top-down AI push. And I can give you an
Mm-hmm.
example of this. So when I was at Prelude, and this was when AI and LLMs were first coming out, ChatGPT hit the scene, right? Shortly after that, there was a lot of pressure from our VCs and our executive and our board and that sort of thing to adopt AI, right? And so there wasn't a sense of a problem that we're trying to solve as much as a if we don't adopt AI today, we're going to be behind.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been the general feeling for the last 2 years. It isn't about the outcome. It's about not being left behind. And so what I'm seeing with a lot of companies today is that same kind of push of we don't really care what the outcome, what the product or the service that we're going to put AI in and sprinkle it on, as long as we have it. And so when you see that and you can kind of correlate that sort of pressure to what you're building in AI, that's usually not the right way to do it. The right way to do it is figure out what kind of outcome that you need for your customer base and focus everything into that and make your AI solution enable or augment or accelerate that. Now, I sat down with a VC, a venture capitalist out in the valley just a few weeks ago, and one of the things they asked me, I love this, right? They asked me a question. They said, "Hey, pitch me on something that you would like want to do one day." I've gotten this from a number of VCs over time. It's just fun, kind of casual dinner
That is fun.
conversation. Yeah, and so I came up with two business ideas. I floated in these two ideas, and his response was, "Neither one of those are AI ideas." Right? And that was seen as like a negative. But it's like to me, that's one of the problems in the industry right now is there's a you don't not everybody has to be an AI company. There can be companies that exist that are AI fueled and augmented, but it's that perception that you have to be a foundational model AI company in order to move from 2025 to 2028.
It's interesting, right? Because I'll echo kind of what you said just from a layman's perspective in terms of going to the large conferences, even the mid-sized ones, right? If you go down to the floor, you look, every single thing from a marketing standpoint is AI, AI. We're an AI solution. I mean, it's a lot of it's lipstick on a pig to your point. And a lot of it's driven top down in marketing spend. They're able to raise cash because of it, and they're just putting it out there and hoping something works, as opposed to, there are some out there that are solving real problems,
Mhm.
right? Which is
Absolutely.
cool too. Um, Current state,
Mhm.
right? So that's where it is. What do you see like the next year bringing us specific to the ones that are going to move the needle in regards to artificial intelligence within the security side?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's going to be major disruption happening, of course, in security. I think one of the cool things I've been able to do during my reset here in the last 4 months or so has been talking to so many founding teams, so many VCs, especially at the mid-size and down is where a lot of my interest in my conversations has gone, which has given me, I think, a really cool insight into where people are putting money and placing bets. What I'm seeing a lot of money going into is detection and response. So I think that is going to be one of the most interesting categories in cybersecurity to look at over the course of 2025. And the reason why I'm seeing so much money going there is kind of what I've deduced from all these conversations is detection and response is trying to solve, specifically the detection side, is trying to solve a problem that has existed as a pain point for CISOs for the last 20 plus years. Now, if you were to ask CISOs, sit down any Fortune 100 CISO like 20 years ago and say, hey, what are your top three pain points? You're guaranteed in the top two to get false positives
Hmm.
or misdetections as one of those, right? False positives in a SOC is a pretty well known problem, right? Now, if you were to ask a CISO today what their top three problems are, they're going to name that in one of their top three problems. Again, false positives, and my SOC is drowning in false positives. Now, with the rise of LLMs and the ability to correlate mass amounts of data in smart ways, there's a lot of call it renewed interest in solving that problem because it hasn't been solved this century yet. And so people are looking at LLMs as the solution to that problem. And so there's a lot of new money going into the detection space to try to solve specifically that. Now, nobody knows if it can be solved or what the right way to solve it is. And that's going to be one of the most interesting ways because I've seen so many startups try to solve this in the last couple months in really wildly different strategic ways.
That's interesting, right? Anecdotally, right? You mentioned the money starting to flow there. From a recruiting standpoint, which is what I do, I haven't seen an incident response job in close to a year.
Yeah.
Right. And whether that's because people are expecting or using automated tools or copilots or whatever to augment what people are doing, maybe that's the case. But to your point, it's still a problem that exists.
Yeah.
Right. In terms of, is it solvable? Right. Is it in your mind?
Yeah, so I think it is solvable, but most of the things I'm seeing out there are not going to solve it. That's one of the most interesting things to me. So an
Why?
example of this is detection related services and products that are being built today on top of AI. Now, there's the going thought that you have a detection engineer, right? Their entire job, or a large part of their job, is writing what are called detection rules. These are basically fancy queries that sit on top of a SIM that will alert if a behavior is noticed on an endpoint or a server somewhere in the environment. So you're writing these rules and you're aligning those rules to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And MITRE ATT&CK is tactics, techniques, and procedures. Now you're aligning a detection rule to the procedure level. There's a procedure is a behavior that an adversary is running on an endpoint somewhere that you hope to catch, a malicious behavior. So your detection rule is meant to catch that. Now, the problem lies in the fact that there are an innumerable number of procedures that exist for every technique. You can never get to the end. So, for example, Mimikatz, a very popular credential dumping program you run mainly on Windows. There's not just one way you can run Mimikatz. There are innumerable ways you can run just that single tool. You can encode it or encrypt it. You can run it from PowerShell, from command line. You can adjust the parameters to make it more invisible, change the hash. You can do all these things, right? Now, you can't write detection rules for every variation of just Mimikatz. Now, if you kind of expand that out to an infinite number of procedures, that means to even attempt to solve the problem that way, you need to have an infinite number of detection rules. Now, if you were to even speculate, again, I love looking at the very end of the rainbow and saying, like, do things make sense if I can do this? Even if I had, say, 1 billion detection rules to try to get coverage the best I could, now I have a new problem of computation power. Now I need computers that are able to process that number of rules in a relatively real time to catch things. And then you've got the network constraints and NIO and all that stuff that kind of comes with it. But that's the direction everybody's kind of going on the detection side, or most people are going, which is, can I automate the detection rule writing process to make sure that we can augment engineers or replace engineers? And that's where I think that a lot of money is being spent, but even if we're successful in those efforts, it doesn't actually solve the problem.
What does solve the problem?
Secure by design. This is one that is very controversial. I've written a little bit about this online and gave a talk actually in Boston last year on this topic, which was actually probably one of the most controversial talks I gave. Half the room was super in agreement. The other half of the room hated me. And the answer I have for this is secure by design systems generate a lot less malicious data. Therefore, it becomes a much more solvable problem because the attack surface is limited. An example on this that I like to give is what I did at Prelude, actually. I gave like a micro example at Prelude. About 2 years ago at the company, what I did was I took away everybody's laptops. Now, most of the company worked on Macs, a couple worked on Windows. I took them all away. And I gave people a choice. You can work on a Chromebook or you can work on an iPad Pro.
Interesting.
Now, most people chose the iPad Pros. And I did this across the company. Software engineers, front end and back end, offensive security engineers, DevOps, myself as the CTO, everybody. And most people were a little bit incredulous that you could perform all the things that you needed to do on an iPad. I wrote the product at Prelude on an iPad. So I wrote the
Wow.
entire product end to end, including an endpoint agent, a back end server system, a front end UI, all that stuff. Now, what happened as a result of moving people to secure by design endpoints and a secure by design backend on AWS Lambda serverless is our security vulnerabilities went down more than 99% day over day, basically squashed it. And our cost went down more than 500% because what's not possible is you can't run endpoint security on secure by design devices, which makes it cheaper and more secure because these devices
Interesting.
are too secure for security products. This is one of the reasons that I actually walked away from Prelude at the end of the day is after doing this exercise, I looked at the endpoints and our security stature, and I came to a light bulb moment, which is the product I wrote for the company actually can't run on any company devices. We actually can't use it because we've created a company more secure than the security product we're selling.
That's wild.
Yeah,
Very,
that's the answer to me is more of that because what that does is that reduces attack surface and it reduces the number of malicious alerts that can be triggered, which gives you now, I think, a much more manageable environment. Now, I always hear kind of the counter to this, which is an enterprise can't do that same move. I did this with 30 people. An
yep.
enterprise can't do that same move, which I think is both true and false. It's true in the sense that it's a much bigger hurdle for them, but it's false in the sense that they can actually do it. It is just somebody at that organization has to stand up and take a risk that could be a career-ending risk if it goes wrong. Now, there aren't too many executives in the CISO level or CIO level that are willing to take that big of a risk, but I think we're going to see at some point in the near future, one, two, three CISOs at major organizations
Mhm.
make that decision, and it is going to pay off handsomely if they do it well. And I think that's going to be a snowball effect.
Wow, interesting. What about outside of detection and response? Looking at future state, where will the impacts of artificial intelligence be felt the most?
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot in the identity space. That's the other like really interesting space that's accelerating right now. A lot of competition in identity because it has been an unsolved space, and all of the advancements in LLMs and AI are prompting people to think maybe it can be solved with the new technology. So that's the other like really interesting spot to look at. And so I do think we're going to see a significant amount of advancements happening on the identity space. I think we're going to see that happen a lot faster than the detection and response because I think identity does not require as much of a, let's call it the impossibility factor is a lot lower
Mhm.
with identity. I think it's a much more solvable problem where even a large organization with say 300,000 employees is a known quantity and authorization and authentication are things that can be done definitively. This person as an employee is an employee of the company and they're authorized for these
Mhm.
products and this usage. I think that is a very solvable problem. The bigger the company is, the tougher it is to do. But I do think we're going to see some advancements in AI with identity solutions that are going to kind of make that rock solid.
There's some out there I've talked to that are trying to solve that exact problem. So you're
Nice.
definitely spot on there. Let's talk about not near future. Let's talk about kind of 5, 10 year horizon, right? What it's going to look like from securing environments, right? And who wins? What wins, right? Because it's always the disruptor that does something completely different than everyone else that ends up being the true game changer, right? What's your forecast for those two things?
Yeah, I think it's going to be. I think velocity would be the word that I would use, and you'll probably, for those that follow me, you'll probably see me say this a lot this year. I think it's going to be the organizations that really adopt velocity are going to be the ones that win in this race. Now, velocity it can mean a few things. I'll really define it here, which is the number of iterations that you can make in a short period of time. Because what I'm seeing, especially when it comes to AI, is things are changing very rapidly, and they always have in the space, but it's much more public now.
Yep.
Now, the people that are capable and the companies that are capable of making a decision, you got to make a decision. People don't like making decisions a lot of times because it introduces risk and change and that sort of thing. But you make a decision, and then you input the information, the results of that decision as quickly as possible into your team, into your mind, into what have you, into your product, and then you convert that into a new iteration to get more inputs. So it's about how many inputs can you get and learn from as quickly as possible. I'm going to call that velocity. I think the companies that really can figure out how to do that well are going to be the ones that win at the end of the day.
Nice. Very cool. In terms of you, right? Let's circle back. Let's go full circle here. Where do you see yourself in the next couple years? What are you going to be working on? What's compelling? There's just what it seems like now you did this reset and you had this aha moment. Like, where are you headed, bud?
Yeah. So I'm working right now very quietly. Things will get more public over time, but I've been working in the background with some like really interesting, really high profile companies in the AI security space. On the public side, public company side, doing some really cool things where I think some of these incumbents that have existed for some time, but may be looked at as maybe a little bit stale in the marketplace. We're going to see some significant advancements there. I think that because I've been in the background working with some, that is going to be cool. So I think in the next few months, people will see, and maybe even in the next few weeks, I'll make a few announcements around some of the work that I'll be doing later in 2025 when it comes to that space. I won't give away the names yet, but that is one area of big focus for me is how can I help advance some of these like really large incumbents that have an opportunity to really make an impact in the space because they already have the market share, they already have the size,
Mm-hmm.
and they just need to have a little bit of maybe my background sprinkled in to assist where I can. The other side that I'm really focused on is almost like the opposite side of the market, which is the smallest of the small,
Mm-hmm.
the sub 50 size of employees, small businesses, like call them the micro businesses. I've been really focused on those personally because I found it really gratifying. The thing that I've really zeroed in on, wrote an article about this just the other week. Can you combine any number of security products in the market? There's 10,000 plus of them, and secure a 5-person company without human beings involved.
Hmm.
So when you go through that exercise, and I wrote about this in depth, you start to realize you actually can't do that. Now that shows there's a massive gap in the market where people are building cybersecurity solutions at the enterprise level that don't actually go down market and help small businesses. And when you think about it logically, you can say, do other enterprise consumer products actually work that way? And they don't. If you look at Slack or Zoom or Teams or any of these enterprise products that exist out in the market, if you use it as an individual or a small business, it's the exact same product that you use as an enterprise. You
Yep.
may unlock some features, but it's the same product. Cybersecurity doesn't actually work that way. There's this massive divide. And I actually think that is an area that is a huge business opportunity that the successful cyber companies are going to be the ones that have products that work at that level that can also extend all the way up to enterprise to mirror what happens in consumer land. And so for me, I've been talking to a large number of small businesses in that 50 and fewer employee size and really understanding what their needs are and how a solution can actually go and extend up to their size.
That's awesome, man. Very cool. Well, so that article actually sounds really compelling. I want to check it out. Where people that are listening, where would they be able to follow you at, check out your work, that type of stuff on?
Yeah, the best place is going to be LinkedIn. And so you can find me on LinkedIn and on GitHub. I'm currently going under the handle of HyperQuack, which is
You
my
love the
latest
ducks.
duck-related handle. And so you'll find a lot of my open source work that I'm doing. So if you're interested at kind of the code level, I love open code, open source code, and being very visible and transparent with my work. And so I've got a handful of like really, I think, interesting projects that I've open sourced from ASM products to CTIM products that I think are just hopefully impactful for the community out there. So you can find me as HyperQuack.
That's awesome. Well, David, thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate it. Great conversation as always. I think that was enlightening. We got to hear a little bit about you and your journey and kind of what your vision, being a pioneer in this side of the house in this space, in terms of what it's going to look like, and its future certainly exciting. So thank you very much for your time and coming on, and I'm sure you and I will chat in a bit.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.